Imagine this. You're a medieval knight, wrapped in 50 pounds of steel. You have been riding your horse for 6 hours, and you really need to pee. What do? Well, we have all seen knights in movies, looking glorious in their shining armor. But nobody ever shows the part where Sir Lancelot has to figure out how to take a leak. So let's answer it. How did knights actually use the bathroom while wearing full armor? It turns out the answer is more interesting than you would expect. First thing you need to know, when we say knight in armor, we are talking about two very different setups, depending on the time period. Early medieval knights, from the 11th century through the early 14th century, mostly wore chainmail. They had it easy. Chainmail is just a metal shirt made of thousands of interlocking rings. Heavy, yes, but it is still just a shirt. Need to go? Hike up the chainmail like any long tunic, drop your pants, squat, and you are done. Undignified, but practical. Then we get to the late medieval period, the 1400s, and armor got more complicated. Full plate armor is the image people think of when they hear the word knight. Solid metal pieces covered the chest, the back, the arms, the legs, and yes, the groin as well. This armor is what you see in museums and in fantasy movies. Unlike chainmail, plate armor did not just hang on the body. It was strapped and buckled to the wearer in many places. Each piece had to fit precisely and connect to the pieces around it. This is where it gets interesting. You might assume a knight was completely sealed inside, but not quite. There was a very good reason for that. Medieval armorers were not fools. They understood that knights needed to function as human beings, but they had a practical problem to solve. Knights rode horses. That was literally the job. The word knight comes from a term meaning mounted warrior. So if you put a solid piece of metal over a rider's crotch and buttocks, he could not sit on a horse, simple as that. Their solution was to get creative with the design. The front was protected by metal plates called folds, basically a metal skirt for the hips and upper thighs. The back had the culotte, horizontal bands of metal protecting the lower back and buttocks. These were not solid sealed pieces. They were articulated. They could move and flex, and importantly, be lifted or removed. The crotch area itself was usually covered by chainmail rather than solid plate. Because this is important, a knight needs to be able to spread his legs to ride a horse. All right, let's get practical. You are a knight in full plate armor. Nature calls. What happens? If you have time and you are somewhere safe, you would probably get your squire to help. Part of being a squire was helping your knight use the bathroom, even though romantic stories never mention that. Your squire would help lift or unbuckle the rear colored plates. You would squat down. Medieval people did not have toilets. They squatted to relieve themselves. Then you would be strapped back in. The whole process probably took a few minutes. You would need to unbuckle or unlace a few straps, lift the culotte plates, do what you needed to do, and get everything back in place properly. The armor had to fit right, or it would not protect you. Was it a pain? Sure. But it was doable. And remember, this was only necessary when you were actually wearing the full armor, which was not all the time. The real question is, what happened during battle? Here's where it gets less funny and more grim. Let me tell you about the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, one of England's most famous victories against France, a legendary battle, and also a battle where the entire English army had dysentery, the bloody flux, medieval diarrhea. Dysentery was probably the biggest killer in medieval armies, way more deadly than actual combat. The English had been marching through France for weeks, and by the time they reached Agincourt, they were sick exhausted, and outnumbered several times over. The English archers, who weren't wearing full armor, just some protective gear, were in stationary positions, shooting arrows at the French. Some historians note that a few of them cut off their soiled pants entirely because it was easier. So you have men standing in a field, firing arrows at French knights, while some of their fellow archers are casually pantless because dysentery does not care about your tactical position. And the knights, the ones actually fighting in close combat with swords and axes, they went into battle in their armor. Think about it. You're in the middle of a battle. Swords are swinging, arrows are flying, someone is trying to cave your skull in with a mace. Are you going to stop, squat down, lift your armor plates, and expose yourself to get stabbed? No, you are going to soil yourself and deal with it later. This is the reality nobody talks about. Medieval warfare was dirty, brutal, and deeply undignified. The idea of knights as pristine, noble warriors is pure fantasy. They were professional soldiers who dealt with the same messy realities as any other fighting force in history. Quick side note, because this comes up. Knights were not immobile tin cans. That myth needs to die. Full-plate armor weighed about 45 to 55 pounds. Modern firefighters often carry more than that. Soldiers in combat gear today often carry 60 to 100 pounds of equipment. More importantly, the weight was distributed across your entire body, not just dumped on your shoulders. Medieval armor was custom-fitted and articulated. Knights could run, jump, roll, and even do somersaults in full plate. There are actual historical combat manuals showing techniques that require this kind of mobility. The crane to get on a horse idea was about jousting armor, specialized extra heavy gear made specifically for tournaments where you would be hit with a lance at full speed. Nobody wore that into actual battle because you would be a slow-moving target. So yes, knights could squat. They could bend. They were more mobile than movies suggest. The armor was designed for combat, and combat requires movement. So here is your answer. Yes, knights could use the bathroom in armor. With chainmail, it was straightforward, just lift and squat. With plate armor, it was more complicated and usually required help from a squire. But the armor was designed with enough flexibility to make it possible. But here's the thing. Most of the time, they just didn't bother. Knights did not wear armor all day. They put it on when they expected trouble, for battles, dangerous travel, or tournaments. The rest of the time, they wore normal clothes like everyone else. So most bathroom trips happened when they were not armored up. In actual combat, they either relieved themselves before the fighting started, or they just dealt with the consequences during battle and cleaned up afterward. When someone is trying to kill you, bathroom etiquette is not exactly a priority. The medieval world was more practical and less glamorous than movies show. These were real people dealing with real human needs, and they solved their problems the same way we do, with the least amount of hassle possible. So next time you see a movie with knights in shining armor, looking all heroic and pristine, just remember, there is a good chance that underneath all that metal, somebody desperately needs to pee. That makes them more relatable than any Hollywood script ever could. If I made you smile during this video, please consider clicking the subscribe button. It would really help me. Thank you.